Hello everybody, and welcome to 28 Days to Better Chess Tactics. This is day 1, and today we're going to go through pins. And so with my course, basically I'm going to go through different tactical motifs and understandings that you can use to improve your chess tactics. And now this won't just include motifs, but also calculation techniques and analysis tips that you can use to figure out how to solve tactical puzzles as well as find tactics in your own games. And so we're going to start here with pins. We're going to go through the most common motifs because those will appear most in your games and you'll use them the most. For example, pins happen a lot. Maybe x-rays, for example, if you're studying x-rays, happen less often. So you don't need to know them as well. But of course you need to know as much as you can, but we're going to start with the most common ones. So here we have a position that, well, I guess it combines two ideas because it's deflection into a pin, but how you would deconstruct this position is, in order to find the candidates, you would look from the king to the queen to the rook and then the bishop. And then after that, the pawns. So in that order, this is how I recommend that you find the candidate moves because it's very systematic. So if you're looking for possible candidate moves, you would see, well, the king doesn't have any because the black queen would simply take the white queen. So we can automatically discount that one. With the queen, you could see that the queen can take the queen, for example, here, but then the knight would simply just recapture. With the rook, you can see that there's really no attacking moves except for here. So an important point to make is that when you're first finding candidate moves, you need to keep an open mind, and you shouldn't discount any move because it seems ridiculous. Yeah, initially it seems ridiculous that you'll bring the rook here because the king can simply take it. But this is where your calculation will come into play. So we know that we could take the queen and it would be an equal trade. The queen could take here as well, and that's a little more unclear. But if the rook simply moves here, then it's a forcing move. The king has to take it. And we can see that the knight is pinned by the bishop. And because the knight is the only one protecting the queen, that we win the queen, basically, because of the pin. So this is how you find chess tactics. You don't necessarily just try to recognize something immediately, but in order to improve and eventually get to that recognition part, you have to slowly work through the elements of the position. Alright, so that is the solution here. Is rook moves forward, king takes, and then the queen takes, and black will basically be forced to lose all his material, and it's pretty much game over at that point. So this was a simple one, and initially I'm going to be doing simple tactics because simple tactics happen most often. So let's say 90% of the time you're only going to be dealing with simple tactics. And they're actually the most important because that's what wins games. So it might seem elementary to focus on simple tactics for a while, but simple tactics actually is what makes the basis of your safety questions when you're looking for moves. Alright, so we're going to move on to different pinning positions. Here's position 1, and it's black to move. And basically, you want to figure out the strongest continuation that either wins material or checkmates the opponent. So I'd like you to pause the position and try to figure it out for yourself. Keep in mind that you want to look at the king here in this position, the queen, and then the bishop, and then the pawns. And you want to find all the checks, captures, and threats, and you want to analyze them until the end of the line. Now, you could just move the pieces on the board initially, but try to use your visualization skills as well, where you just look at the position and try to do it in your head. So pause the video now, and I'll come back in a couple seconds and we'll analyze how to solve this position. Okay, so in this position, we can see it's black to move that first off, white is threatening the black queen, so we have to do something with the queen, but the queen is also hitting the rook. So what we'd like to do is to take this rook. You can also notice that all of these pieces are on the light square diagonal, and we have a light square bishop. So looking at the king, there's nothing we can do with the king to prevent the queen from being taken. So we either have to move the queen or trade. So we're looking at all the checks, captures, and threats. So we could take the rook and we could take the queen. So if we analyze taking the queen, we can see white is forced to take back. So what forcing or attacking moves do we have at this point? We can check and we can pin the rook. And so that's exactly what happens. We pin the rook, and because the white king is far enough away, we win not only the rook but this pawn if he makes that move. Okay, so going back, you can see that simple positions like this happen a lot. So you want to be able to find simple solutions to the problem and notice the elements in the position. Okay, moving on. Okay, in position 2, you want to find all the checks, captures, and threats or attacking moves. So pause the position, and it's white to move here, so you want to look at every single piece and be thorough in your analysis. Okay, so if we look through this position, you can see that even though it's a simple solution, you want to be thorough. So if we look at the king first, we can see that we can castle. We can see that we can develop the queen. There's a lot of moves here. You can develop the bishop. So what you want to do though is you want to find all the attacking moves, the moves that you can do, that you can move as forward as possible. So yes, you can castle, but you also want to look at all the pawns and the moves that are on the opponent's side of the board. You can notice that the bishop is pinned, or is pinning the knight to the king. So the only attacking moves that we have really are either to take here, or to move the pawn forward to d5. So of course normal developing moves are good, but when you want to find attacking moves, you want to look for all the checks, captures, and threats. For example, castling doesn't have any threats. Moving the bishop is just a developing move. Taking here is an option to look at, but we see that there's no way for black to push this bishop back, and so the pin is absolute. So if we move the pawn forward, there's no way for black to threaten this bishop away in time. So he's forced to bring his bishop out and lose a piece for a pawn. So as you can see, in the opening, these kind of tactics happen a lot. Even though it looks very simple, you'd be surprised how often they're missed because one of the players just simply doesn't look for tactical opportunities from the opening. Maybe it's a blitz game, for example, and instead of attacking this knight, they would just castle. And by then it's too late because they'll bring the bishop out and that tactic is not there on the board anymore. Alright, moving on to position 3. Welcome to position 3. So just pause your screen right now and take a little bit to go through finding all the checks, captures, and threats in a systematic manner, and seeing also what the opponent is threatening and what you would do. Okay, so in this position, even though it has a simple solution, what you want to do is you want to notice what the opponent's threatening. So black is basically threatening checkmate. Now, in tactics, just because your opponent has a threat does not mean that you should not look for attacking moves of your own. And actually, it's the best to simply counterattack. But I've seen it happen often where if your opponent has a very strong threat, such as checkmate, you simply miss your simple opportunities. And now you can notice that the rook can simply pin the queen to his king. Now, there might be an error where you think that you have to move this pawn up to interpose, but a pin is just as strong. So if we bring the rook here, now, because the queen is pinned, it can't checkmate here. And not only do you prevent checkmate, but you win the queen. Alright, moving on to position 4. Welcome to position 4. So in position 4 here, it's white to move, and you want to find basically all the attacking moves, all the checks, captures, and threats. And you do that. This is a simplified version, but basically you're looking at the queen here. The king doesn't really have any moves, and you can't really move any of the pawns for an attacking move, well, except for c4. So take a minute and just try to go through the thought process, finding all the possible variations. Okay, so you can see here that the queen basically has 2 attacking moves. The queen can move here, and it looks like if he moves there, then he's checking the king as well as hitting the rook. But you have to analyze what black can do. So if we move here, now if the king moves, then yes, you win the rook, but the rook would simply interpose. So that ends that variation. Now the other option is you can pin the rook. So what happens if you pin this rook? Well, his only move to protect the rook is to bring the pawn up. And this is another idea with a pin piece, is stacking your resources against the pin piece. And so the piece is still pinned, but we can bring in another attacker, which is this pawn to c4. And now we win a rook for a pawn, as there's no way for black to prevent this. So in positions like this, you have to analyze whether the opponent has a defensive resource. And in this case, he does not. So you win. Alright, welcome to the last position in this video. This is position 5, and I'll give you a minute to find the solution. It's white to move and win. Okay, so in this position, we can see that it's basically white has an extra bishop, and white is simply attacking, and it looks like he's going for checkmate, but we need to find the concrete way that he's going to do that. So we can look at the king first, no king move. The queen, we notice that there is a forcing move to take this pawn, and we can investigate if that works, and bishop can take this pawn. We can see that doesn't really work though, because the rook could simply take. And as for the rooks, it looks like we can bring the rook in here, but black would just simply take. So we're going to start with the queen, and we'll investigate whether that leads to checkmate. So even though it looks ridiculous initially to sacrifice the queen, we have to analyze the position after. And you can see that the pawn is pinned here, which effectively neutralizes this pawn controlling this square. And so we can bring the rook over, and that actually results in checkmate because of the pinned pawn as well as the pawn here protecting the flight square. So if we go back, we can see that actually in this position it's quite simple, and there's not so many moves to consider, because a lot of them you'll immediately discount, and the ones that do work you'll quickly see how it leads to a forced checkmate. Thanks for watching, guys. This is day 1 of my 28 Days to Better Chess Tactics, and we focused on pins here. So hopefully this was helpful, and I'm going to try to basically focus on a progressive series where we go through all the motifs from simple to complicated. And just leave a comment, let me know what you think, and we'll go from there. Alright, thanks for watching.